I'm Josh O'Neill. I'm the publisher of Locust Moon. We're a small comics press based in Philadelphia. We recently put together a pretty unusual project, a collaboration with the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's a companion to a currently running exhibition that they have there called The Wrath of the Gods, which is built around this painting, Prometheus Bound by Peter Paul Rubens. Was created around 1611. It's the largest and most ambitious painting of his career. It makes its home at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where it's been frightening children for over 40 years. It's 8 feet tall. It's an overwhelming visual experience. It depicts the punishment of Prometheus, who was an ancient Greek mythic character. He was a giant immortal titan who famously stole fire from Mount Olympus to give to man. As a punishment for his theft, Zeus chained him to the top of a mountain where an eagle would devour his liver. Because he was immortal, his liver would regenerate every day, and the next day the eagle would devour it again. The purpose of the Wrath of the Gods show is to position that painting historically and show the works that Rubens was inspired by. He traveled around Europe a lot, seeing all this different stuff, including artwork by Titian, Michelangelo, the ancient Roman statue of Laocoon. Because one of the main themes of the myth of Prometheus is artistic inspiration. That myth is where we get the phrase, passing the torch. The idea is that this fire that Prometheus gave to man is something that's still burning today. So the museum commissioned us at Locust Moon to continue this tradition of succession and artistic inspiration with this comic, PROMETHEUS ETERNAL, in which many of the greatest cartoonists and illustrators working today adapt the myth of Prometheus and explore Rubens' great work with original comics and artwork of their own. I don't think that the museum entirely knew what they were getting into when they signed us up to do this project. Like a lot of museums, they are struggling to bring in younger people. So I think when they first envisioned this, they thought, rightly, Prometheus is a sort of superheroic figure. So we can make this sort of brightly colored superhero comic for kids. Instead, we gave them these 8 very sophisticated, heavy, unique, intense pieces that all kind of explore this mythology in different ways. But I guess the museum must have liked it because they put it in the actual exhibition alongside Michelangelo and Rubens, which creates a kind of cognitive dissonance. When you see it, you have to kind of squint. I keep adjusting my glasses, but no, it's really there. Here, I put another picture closer up so you can see it's really there. So the biggest part of the pride we feel for having this work on display in this completely unusual setting is that due to the fact that all these artists involved, including Bill Sienkiewicz, Paul Pope, Dave McKean, David Mack, Grant Morrison, and these 3 amazing people seated over here have spent their careers in illustration and comics, proving that those mediums don't mean any one thing. They're not low or high art. They're infinitely expressive, all-encompassing media. So let me introduce 3 of my favorite artists in the world, all people whose work has been published by Locust Moon multiple times, who contributed incredibly valuable pieces to Prometheus Eternal. Yuko Shimizu is a New York-based award-winning illustrator and instructor at the School of Visual Arts. She began her career in Japan in the field of public relations before deciding to move to New York to pursue her lifelong dream of being an artist. In not much more than a decade, she's become one of the most beloved and admired illustrators in the world, publishing work in the pages of the New York Times, the New Yorker, Time Magazine, The Atlantic, and on the covers of the monthly DC comic, The Unwritten. Her first self-titled monograph was published by Gestalten in 2011. Her children's book, Barbed Wire Baseball, came out from Abrams in 2013. Since 2003, she's been training the next generation of illustrators as a professor at SVA, and in 2009, she was listed among Newsweek Japan's 100 Japanese people the world respects. Andrea Tsurumi is a New York City illustrator and cartoonist with a bachelor's degree from Harvard and an MFA from the School of Visual Arts. She's the author of a wide variety of wonderful self-published comics, including Andrew Jackson Throws a Punch, Eavesdropper, and Graxa Gamgasher. And as an illustrator, her clients range from the New York Times to Penguin Books to Bitch Magazine. She's been awarded a silver medal from the Society of Illustrators, as well as an American Illustration Award and other honors. Lisk Feng is an award-winning illustrator who's originally from China and is now a New York-based freelance illustrator. She graduated with an MFA in illustration from the Maryland Institute College of Art in 2014, and since has received awards such as the Society of Illustrators Medal, Communication Arts Illustration Award, 3x3 Student Award Silver Medal, American Illustration Award, and others. Though most of her work in America has been illustration, she's also worked with Locust Moon as a cartoonist several times with short stories in Quarter Moon Magazine, Little Nemo Dream Another Dream, and now Prometheus Eternal. And all three of these people were also featured in the Locust Moon book, Little Nemo Dream Another Dream. So I figured I would start off very simple. The three of you all approached this project in very different ways. Lisk, the story that you illustrated is a modern-day adaptation of the Prometheus myth. Yuko, yours is an illustration riffing on representation of Prometheus in the Wrath of the Gods show. And Andrea, yours is a non-fiction piece telling the story of Rubens and Snyder's creating Prometheus Bound. Could you each sort of walk us through your pieces and tell us a little about how you ended up going down the particular roads you went down, starting with Yuko?
So I don't do comics, and they're okay. Locust Moon is okay that I don't do comics. I'm in comic industry for quite a while, so people just assume I do comics, but I have only done covers. So my main thing is one panel image that tells stories. And so I said no to Little Nemo, and they were like, yeah, you can do one page. And so like that's why I'm in, and then this is the same thing. So it started off, the idea started from, okay, what are the other people who are mainly comic artists or the illustrators who do comics? So the book is, mostly about comics, and what would they do and what can I add to it? So if it's a comic, most probably the characters are there, otherwise the comics won't, move. So either the artist himself or the Titan himself will be in there. So my job is to, not to compete, but create something different that goes with what other people might do. And so the idea is to, okay, then let's create a portrait of Prometheus without drawing him. So I read a lot of things online. It's easy to do research now. And then came up with this piece.
Andrea?
So when we talked about this, you sent me the curator Christopher Atkins's, I'm not sure what it's called, but it's like a book of essays.
The catalog.
The catalog. The catalog copy for this exhibition, which is usually includes like a bunch of essays about what this painting means and its background, its history, and why this exhibition is focused the way it is. I also listened to what you had described about this comic and thought, well, what is everybody doing similar to you, and what can I do differently, or which angle is most appealing and challenging and interesting in a certain way? And you and I talked about maybe doing the history of it, because history is one of my interests. And Rubens, to be honest, Rubens has never been, the man for me, I only really encountered him in the word Rubenesque, to describe a certain type of female body that's represented a certain way. And when I saw the painting of Prometheus, I was like, it's a beautiful painting, it's very, masterful, but I don't get it. And then at all, and then I read the essays, and it was amazing because the background on Rubens and the background on why he made this painting and his different approaches and what each thing that he showed means is very similar to had a lot of parallels to the process that I use in my creation of art, or even what you just described, and looking at different elements, processing them through your own mind, and then putting your own spin on it. finding inspiration in what's around you and making something completely new, which was the point of these essays and the point of this painting. So I thought, you know, history, okay, that's my way in, I'm going to do this. Because I'm a smartass, I can't resist like poking fun at Rubens, because it's this guy who's young, he's in his 20s, he's traveling through Europe, he's going to all these places, way more than everyone else in his peer group is going to. He's multilingual, he can ride a horse better than anyone else, he's like a spy. I don't know if y'all know that, but he's a spy. He is just this boss, but he's also 20, and he really, really wants to be like the best painter in Europe of his era ever. Be rich, you know, have the fancy clothes, just wants to be the best, but he's like cool about it. So he thinks all these things, and he doesn't really like give them away, but when he was studying all these things, and when he was planning Prometheus, it's hard not to see him as like an art student, you know, like someone who's just like, oh man, it's so, I want to be the best, you know. So that's how I've drawn him, is, you know, kind of looking at his posters and enjoying that. So I was
very stocking feet.
yeah. With the famous beards of history on the side, and you know, what would be in his thing. So that was amazing, because it was all these like human elements, artistic elements, things about inspiration that came through the exhibit. It was very interesting to channel that into this comic, and especially in a way that I think only comics could have done. But I've been talking too long, so.
Liz?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for the beautiful written story, because when I got the topic, I was kind of thinking about a lot of different aspects of Rubens, and then all the catalog you sent it to me. And then, but as I read your story, I do feel it's completely different. It's a very different story from the original one, but it's actually really beautiful. And then I do feel related first time reading it, and I teared up a little bit, because this story is mainly about a father and then a daughter, the relationship, and then also how important it is for their father to bring the whole family together to 40s Hong Kong, from the little town and to Hong Kong, and then to start a new life. And also, and afterwards he got a liver cancer, and then so he passed away. And then so this is basically the whole idea. And then it's only 5 pages, but there are a lot of information going on. It covers actually several, maybe 20 years timeline, and then it's very different, I will say. And then I put a lot of my own experience into it, because I never had a father, like from my childhood to my maybe 7 years old. I don't have a father. So when I think about this character, I think about more emotional stuff, and I feel like father needs to be like a mountain, or like a safety place for his little girl to have some space. Like this is like the most important person in her whole life. So that's why this comic, her father is actually a very, very important man, and then he suddenly realized something. He got the fire in his eyes, and then he said, let's pack up and let's move to Hong Kong. And then that's why they go. And then he started to live another life. He was riding horses, and then now he's finding jobs, and then drinking in bars by himself. And then the daughter and the mother, they're like trying to earn more money. So the story is really, really touching. And then I also really love the ending. The ending is really, really beautiful. And then for the Rubens painting, I do. We discussed about it, and then I try to put the old painting into this one. Like he is struggling because he has the liver cancer, but the pose is similar to the Rubens painting. That's how I combine them together. And then at the end, the story ends in a really quiet, I will say, really quiet way. Yes, that's how he posed. From this painting, I do feel it's really like painful, struggling, and then. But for the comic, I actually tune it down a little bit. I want to make it more mild and soft. So and then at the end, it says, oh, why don't you light the flame? And then she is the daughter, and then she's like 40 years old, 40 years old, and then she has another son, and then so they're at the tomb, and then they light up a fire, and then she passed the flame to the son, and then say, why don't you light up the flame? That's so beautiful. Sorry, the story itself is really, really touching. So I'm really glad I can do this. Yes.
So you guys both kind of touched on like looking through the catalog and seeing all this material that was in the Wrath of the Gods show. I was curious how much of that stuff found its way into your artistic process, or how much were you riffing on that stuff, and how much were you creating something entirely new? Let's start with your list.
I will say I don't use that many references from the thing you gave it to me, because it's a pretty modern story. It's very different. The original references are really traditional, like ancient Greece mythology stuff, and then I do feel, because the story is really narrative and modern, and tell stories that we know what's going on right now. So I prefer to stop reading those parts a lot and then just focus on the story. So that's why, and I do think if you know about the original story, you will find connections from the story itself. So I will say I didn't use a lot.
Andrea, I mean, obviously you are actually engaging with the written material in the catalog, but from a visual sense, how much?
It is one of the reasons I thought that comics was the perfect medium to tackle this subject, because after reading all the material, I was thinking, what is this about? What are the main ideas behind the story of this painting and behind the story of what Rubens did and the story of Prometheus? And the inspiration idea, of course, is forefront. So I was fascinated by the process of artistic inspiration, the idea of like saturating yourself with examples of other art or other types of inspiration, and then kind of synthesizing it and making something new, which apparently was something that Rubens did in his own right. That's one of the reasons that Rubens is spectacular for his time, especially. And to be able to draw that, like especially on the first page, it was thinking like, comics, people who are outside of the creative process, the idea of inspiration is very mysterious and weird, I think. There's always that question, like, where do your ideas come from? How does it happen? And I think sometimes there's this idea that you just kind of like make. And, this idea of like the quickness and the labor, and that it comes completely from you, it's not from anything else. There's not the idea of like the engagement. Like the Prometheus thing, he takes the fire from the gods, he gives it to the human. That kind of like chain of interaction is important in artistic creation. But in kind of like explicating the ideas behind it, with the comics I get to draw that like explanation point of inspiration, and I really wanted to show it happening again and again in the first page and the last page, to show that like that moment of passing is happening when Michelangelo, so is it the Laocoon? Laocoon? Do you all know what that? Laocoon?
Really? That's what it looks like.
The big statue that was dug up, that's like Laocoon and his sons struggling with the snake. I think there's a model in the Met. I could be wrong. So that was dug up in 1540, and Michelangelo saw it and it like blew his mind. And he was sketching it, and he took that pose of the main character, and he put it into The Last Judgment. He put it into the piece that is in the show, and then Rubens years later sees Laocoon, and also sees Michelangelo's piece riffing on the Laocoon, and he has his own moment of like, oh my god, like I want to do this. Titian also saw Laocoon and had that same thing. So all of these moments of just like sparking were happening between these people, years down the line. And after Rubens made his own thing, he went on to inspire other people to make work. Like Rembrandt saw The Wrath of the Gods, and was this. So I feel like comics were like an excellent way of just showing how ideas happen, because they're so good at showing how you think. The visual side of how you think, maybe more so than like an essay in a catalog. So that I thought that was like an interesting engagement with the material.
Yuko, what about you?
Well, I don't do comics. I think my process is pretty simple. Whether this or any other illustration project, like I just sit in front of a computer and do like two types of research: the reading research and the visual research. So like I type in Prometheus and like what do I get? And I get like gazillion like master paintings, and they kind of look similar. I'm sure like one's influenced by the other, influenced by the other, influenced by the other. So like like trying to get the direction. Like okay, so like there are a lot of key visuals like fire or the eagle or the mountains of Caucasus, like all these like key visuals. But like what's important, what should be in there, and then like what kind of style should I do? And like I did the fake 15th, 16th century Northern European woodblock print look, but like it's all fake, and so like that's.
Were you looking at the Goltius prints that were part of the exhibition?
There are circular ones. It's on their website. And they're like really crazy looking. The anatomy's kind of off, but like really powerful and super contemporary looking. So that's more of what I was like inspired by. I tend to get attracted to something like graphic and dramatic, and which was not exactly what those prints were going for. But there are some artists who do come out with things that are like completely out of that time period. They're like full circular ones with like 4 different gods flying into the sky and then fall. So it's like full circular prints of gods, different gods falling from the sky, and from the weirdest angle. Yeah, like too bad you don't have them. But
yeah,
like,
I thought I had them here.
Those were like what I was interested in. They have a lot of like Dutch prints, and Chris, right, the curator, is like his specialty is Dutch art and Dutch and Flemish art. So there are a lot of Dutch and Flemish artwork, which some of them are like very like something I have never seen before, and yeah, it's cool. Like I think like I got to talk to him last week, and what's interesting was like, my guess is he's really into comics.
He likes comics a lot. I think he was very into comics when he was younger, and he's now just kind of realizing how much cool stuff is going on.
And I'm a little bit sidetracked, but like I think the best thing about this project is, the institution of art. The one of the most famous museums in like art museums in US decides to put this show together of like super famous artworks and artists from Renaissance, and then let's do a comic book.
Right.
And then like everyone said yes, and like let's put it in the gallery, and like I guess everyone said yes. And there's always like comic artists, and I'm sure you're either comic artists or illustrators, or like at least like you're really interested in those. And we always have to like defend ourselves against the fine art people. I mean, like, I don't have anything against, but like fine art people, their job is to look down on illustration and comics, right? And this fine art institution is like, let's do comics, that's cool. Like, let's put in the gallery, that's cool. And I think that's the greatest thing, and I wonder how it was happening. And then I was like, Chris, the curator, is secretly loving comics and wanted to do it, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I think he grew up loving comics, and I don't think has read one in 15 years.
Doesn't matter.
Like, this is awesome. Super into it. But that I was also curious, like, how much that affected your thinking about, like, the context of it being in this museum among all these other works of art. Did that influence your thinking about how to approach the piece at all?
what's in the museum outside of the
Just
show.
just the fact that it was going to be in this really unusual context.
You know what? Like, I wasn't really aware. Like, I mean, like, of course, you told me what the project was, and then like, oh, there's gonna be this show, and there's gonna be a companion book. But I just assumed that it's something for kids that they were selling, or like not kids, but like young people. They're selling at the store. Like the art museums do a lot of things, and come out with some booklets for kids or whatever. So I wasn't really thinking the importance of it. And I don't know, like, it was from the start that they were planning on putting it in the gallery.
We didn't know that either.
Yeah, so like, like it didn't start off as like this like heavy important project I'm tackling. It's just like, oh, okay, they're selling it at the museum store, cool. And then all of a sudden, it's in the gallery. And then, like, like, so,
killed it.
like, and then, like, at the museum, we did a talk at the museum, and then, like, so what do you think your work is exhibited with Michelangelo and, like, Titian and all that? And then, like, what do you think? And, like, I didn't really feel it until I came here. So I guess, like, I wish my mom was here. Everyone said I wish my mom was here.
Andrea, what about you?
You said it all. I really thought gift shop. I mean, you mentioned the gift shop, so.
Yeah. Well, it's in the gift shop, too.
It is in the gift shop, very prominently, too. Yeah, it's just, like, can't mess up. It's just great. I think just, like, I focused on the job and tried to do the best I could, and there was a moment where I was lightboxing Michelangelo, just laughing at myself, because have you ever tried to draw Michelangelo? Like, I draw like pies attacking cakes. It's not, I might have drawn that like the day before I was drawing Michelangelo, like, now Michelangelo, it's just ridiculous. But it really didn't hit me until I went to the museum for Locust Moon Festival, and met the people who work there, who are amazing and really gracious and very excited, and kind of like also amused and excited by this project too. So, I mean, you know more about the inception and the inception of it, but it didn't really think about it.
Liz?
I'm just will be really happy about it. It's such a cool idea to just show comics with those like classical huge paintings that's fascinating. And also I know there's a lot of people were talking about those old topics about like being like different art forms are blurred, the boundaries are blurred right now. So so putting comics into a classic painting gallery is supposed to be awkward, but it's not, because the boundary is blurred. But I personally do think it doesn't matter. I never care about any like groups, like comics shouldn't be in this, and then so I think it's totally wrong. I just said, oh, that's a really nice one that people can read comics in the awesome gallery, awesome museum. I mean, it's just a really nice opportunity. And then also, I will never care about where it is. I love this project, and then I love the story itself. So wherever it published, or it's just maybe selling it in the small store, or like showing in the gallery or the museum, it never bothers me. Like, I will do the same thing. Like, I think it's just like that. Like, you love it and then you do it. So.
Well, speaking of those blurring boundaries, how do you feel about how the perception of comics is changing? I mean, a project like this could never have happened 25 years ago.
Like, I will say, because more and more, first of all, I will say a lot of people, they like comics. For like all my friends, they're reading comics, and then there are great artists who creates great comics, like Dave McKean. I mean, oh my God, he's. You can say he's an artist. I don't want to say he's only a comic artist. So the boundary is never there anymore, because people can do different things. I myself, I do illustration, and then I also did children's books before. I was doing manga in China, like for 8 years, because I was in China all the time, and then all Asian, a lot of the main, I will say, main market for teenagers, a big part is manga, like big eye, pop eyes, girls, you know, like Japanese stardust. And then I think it's awesome because people need it. Everything is there because a reason, you know. So that's why I feel like I can do anything. If I want to do a comic more artistic way, I can do it more artistic way. Indie comics, they're awesome, and then also illustrations. Sometimes, if they're narrative enough, they can treat it as a comic too. Like I will say, everything can put together, and then as long as it's a great project, it never matters. Yes, so that's why I think the boundary is starting to disappear. Maybe for some, I will say, I still have those friends who's for example, fine artists, and then they will say, oh, graphic designs, I don't understand graphic designs, or comics, it's a two different thing. When I say, oh, your painting looks really like illustration, his face, I saw his face. He's like, you said my oil paintings are like illustrations? And I was like, oh, shit, I said something wrong. But I didn't realize it because I thought it's a compliment. Like, I said, oh, your drawings are so good. It's like illustrations. And then his face like, but it will change in the future, I will say. But it never matters to me. Like, to me, everything is good. I can accept any format, yes.
Right. I don't know what's going on over there. Sure, I don't understand how computers work.
That's the rescue.
It's auto-saving in the background.
Andrea, what do you think about the changing place of comics in the cultural landscape?
I can only talk about what I've seen and what I've heard and what I've experienced in America. I think it's very generational, right? Like you said that Chris read comics when he was a kid and then didn't know, Chris the curator, like didn't know that there was all this happening, and didn't know that there's like Brecht Evans and Paul Pope and all these people doing this stuff right now, and now hopefully is like super on board with that. But there's been this whole world, there's been this, beautiful artistry. I mean, it talked about the Crazy Cat is gorgeous, and I think children's book illustration and picture book illustration and comics are all just like the same thing as fine art. It's that communication and creation combination. It's very alliterative, but generationally, like I can kind of see the years stacking up. Like the 50s are burning the comics in the backyards. Then comics become kind of lobotomized. You have Baby Batman at a certain point, and then there's the resurgence in the 90s, 80s. And then I remember when I was in high school, the Chris Ware and Daniel Klaus and Craig Thompson comes out with Blankets, and all of a sudden it's on the New York Times bestseller list, and Mouse is in there earlier, and you can kind of see it happening. I'm really, really interested in what's going to happen, say, like the next 20 years, because of this being all out there and existing, and the kids who are reading it now, like the younger people reading it now, it's like if the younger readership stays with it and doesn't have that gap like happened for him, I think that would change the landscape and change people's receptivity to where comics can be in culture, maybe something closer to like France or Japan, where it's more mainstream. And typically I think larger institutions like academia and fine arts institutions, they're slower on the uptake because they're bigger and weightier and don't move as fast. And by the time something gets to Philadelphia Museum of Art, it's probably really important or really interesting or really celebrated or very old. And this is just an interesting kind of example of them looking at something that they've maybe haven't seen before, or like something kind of up high, I don't know, just noticing it. I don't think there's any different, I agree with you, I don't think there's any difference in content or whatever. There might be a difference in distribution method. You can see the tiny comic compared to the enormous painting. But yeah, so I guess it's just our history.
Yuko, I'm curious your perspective, because it seems like every week there's another article in the newspaper that says, bang, Zoom, comics aren't kids anymore. But as an illustrator, how do you feel about how that compares to the perception of illustration as a medium?
Well, there are a lot of illustrators who do comics, and there are a lot of comic artists who do illustrations. And I did say I only do illustrations, but many of my friends are comic artists, and that is probably one of the reasons I don't do comics, because I know how much passion and hard work there is. It's way more. And at some illustration events, long time ago, when I was starting out, I went to this illustration event, and there was this Canadian comic artist who sometimes do illustrations, and he said, and not to degrade illustration, he said, like, compared to making comics, illustration is easy. And then some illustrators who were sitting there in the audience got furious. But I was like sitting there and like, but that's so true. Like, like don't get offended. That doesn't mean illustration is easy. It's not easy. But if I finish one panel, I'm done. And, right? It's a very labor-intensive one panel, but it's one panel. And while these guys, or you guys who do comics, like, it's like, like, I'm sorry, I calculate, like, so you want me to do comics and, like, how many spot illustrations are in there? And it's like, one panel has to make sense as a story, as a narrative, as a concept, as well as composition. Then the whole page has to make sense in the same way. Then the spread has to make sense compositionally and everything. And then the whole book has to make sense. It's a lot of work. And but comics illustration, Paul Rand, not Rand Paul Rand, the famous graphic designer, once said there are only two types of art: good art and bad art. So as long as it's good, like, does it matter? It doesn't.
Right. Well, what is it that you guys think? I mean, this myth of Prometheus has been something that people have been depicting for thousands of years at this point. And it's so deep in, like, human consciousness. What do you think it is that keeps people coming back, and why do so many artists seem to do such incredibly ambitious work around this one theme?
I think it was the Prometheus, the main key is he got punished for helping the humans, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. That's why people get so attracted, because he tried to help us, and that thus he's punished. And that symbolizes a lot more than other Greek gods, I think.
Well, it's interesting seeing in the show the images of Jesus that are almost exactly the same as the image of Prometheus. It almost becomes the same. Andrea, what do you think?
I would agree. The suffering, the engaged struggle, the muscular, laborious struggle to pass something on is a very good description of the creative process. And I mean, that's why Prometheus is I guess he's seen as this figure of inspiration or artists in that. I don't actually, I mean, Prometheus is not huge in my own life, but I can see why, I can see why it's one of the reasons why Rubens chose a particular subject, and I can see why it would be attractive to revisit over and over again as an example of what that is, because it's a never-ending struggle, right? Well, I guess he gets freed eventually, spoiler, but he Hercules, but it's like renewed over and over and over again, and each time the liver hurts just as much, I'm assuming, just as much as the first time. And like with art, like you're never like at a point where you're like, all right, I got it, like I know what I'm doing, like it's totally great. Like every single time you're doing a new thing, it's this other struggle again, which I think is why whenever I meet up with other artists or illustrators, it's almost like it becomes like a therapy circle or like a Jungian analysis group. Like you end up just talking about your process and like how your mind works versus how their mind works, and it's this very engaged, interesting description of like how you engage with the world and how you why or how or whatever the craziness of being an artist and creating, and this constant loop, which is why there's a lot of anxiety, I think, in comics and illustration and art. So I guess that would be the representation of it.
For me, I will say, like, first of all, I will say mythology stories, they have their intelligence in it for thousands of years, and then a lot also contains a lot of problems, and then unsolved problems that until today people still thinking about it. Like, for example, this one is people always thinking about why and how, and then why is the painful, where it come from, and then people ask themselves all over and over again, until now still unsolved. So I will say they're so clever to think about it, and then people are just people, and then we're still coming back to this topic and then discuss about it. Maybe next 1,000 years we're still studying this, because it's gonna be a never-ending process. So that's why I think a lot of people are coming back to this topic over and over again, and then try to discover something new, and then it's just a process, and then just enjoy the whole thing. It will be really fun.
So I got a couple more questions, but I think we're running out of time. So anybody have any questions? Do a quick Q&A.
I have never heard of a book like.
The question is, just for the cameras, the question is, has there ever been a book like this that takes a classic work of art and asks a lot of different artists to comment on it with their own pieces? I don't know. Can you guys think of any? I'm sure there are.
There's the Louvre series.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think Karen Green was talking about. It's unusual for a museum to partner with comic book artists. Let us not underscore that enough. But the Louvre has done it. I think they might have a whole series. They at least have 3 books about the museum itself, or about their works in it. There's a book by David Prudhomme and a book by Nicolas de Crécy called Glacial Period. It was developed as a way to engage, same as this, like engage viewers and visitors to the museum in an interesting way with the work. But I don't know if there's one specifically devoted to one work.
But was it in the gallery?
It was in the gift shop.
No, we were in the gallery,
Any other questions?
Or were you joking about?
No, I think it's true. The question was, did the museum really expect to get a more... I think they expected a more kid-oriented kind of... I mean, I think they just expected something much more like Superman. Because for the right reasons, they saw Prometheus as this superheroic figure. And the first comic in the book is a superhero comic. It's Grant Morrison and Farrell Dalrymple teaming up to do a straight-up Prometheus as superhero story. But at Locust Moon, we do a lot of these different anthology projects, and it's always a very appealing thing for us, the different ways that different amazing artists can approach the same material. And also, we had almost no time to get the project done, so we knew we had to get a bunch of people on board. So it was very interesting. We knew we didn't want any one tone to kind of permeate the book. We wanted there to be a sort of wide variety of stuff in there. Which leads into another question that I didn't get to yet. Out of just a matter of coincidence, the 3 of you represent the female contingent of Prometheus Eternal. And you're dealing with this subject matter. What's that?
Is it just us?
Yeah, it's the 3 of you. I mean, there's only 8 artists in the book, so almost 50-50. But it's like the subject matter is kind of stereotypically masculine. It's all like blood and fire and endless rippling muscles. I was curious if you were, like, how much you were reacting and how much you were embracing those aspects or reacting against them, or whether you were aware of that dichotomy at all. You don't have to answer the question.
No, that's fine.
I might point out that, I mean, like Jesus, Prometheus kind of has a metaphorical vagina going on.
What?
He's got a wound in the side.
Wait, Jesus has metaphorical vagina?
Let's put a pin in that. I mean, maybe, but the muscles, Rubens wanted to paint a lot of muscles, but the suffering and whatever. I prefer, classical paintings of like Hannah, or whoever the woman was who cut off Holofernes' head or whatever. But the idea of inspiration, like I engage with that totally. The idea of the creative process, absolutely. And Rubens, like as a student, just trying to make it. Yeah, of course, I totally identify with that thing, but not as a guy, I guess. I mean, maybe not as the swagger. I guess I identify with Snyder's, the guy who did the eagle thing, because he just really loved painting animals.
Yeah, I never mentioned him, but he painted like half the painting. It's like, it should be known it's a collaboration between Rubens and this guy Franz Snyder's, who was known as like the greatest animal painter in Europe, and so Rubens got him to paint the bird, who is literally like probably at least a third of the painting.
I'm sorry. I think for me, like, it's more interesting to draw like muscular male figure than if we were given like female nude, which is like half of what's in the museum, and we see them as like high art, but like some of them didn't, many of them didn't start that way when they were painted that way. So I would have a lot more problem if it was this like male nude figure that is the part of the show, and that we have to come out with comics or illustrations. But like, it's just like a really good story, and it needed to be that kind of art, and I have no problem with that.
For me, like masculine is always everyone has different interpretations for this word. I mean, like in Asian, especially for me, I was originally from China, and then we don't mention this word a lot, like as much as here. So for me, when I read the whole story, I was like, it's a very complicating thing to think about. For example, how you define father. Is he masculine enough or not? You can't say, because you need your father to have some masculine point, that he can lead. He can be a leader to the whole family, but also he's soft because he's your father. So that's why I think it's hard for me to think about. Also, maybe I'm a woman, so maybe I'm more sensitive and more emotional to think about this topic. So that's why I probably get rid of some of the part of the original ideas of the masculine, like muscles, but I do keep some of the personalities, like the moment he opened the door and then he said, "Let's pack up and go." He says, "No doubt, we'll go now." But when he's in hospital, he lies there and he touches his little baby's face, and then at that moment he's another person. He's not that person anymore. So I will say it's really hard to talk about this. It's just a very complicating. Like, it's in the middle somewhere. Yes.
Interesting. Well, we should stop because they're going to kick us out of here. We're going to have a little book signing. There's copies of Prometheus back there. There's the new copy of Quarter Moon that Lisk did the cover for. Some copies of Little Nemo, which all three of these guys are in. So thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it.